My name is Sarah Jenkins. I'm 32 years old, and I'm a freelance graphic designer. The late afternoon sun was already dipping behind the old oak tree in front of my childhood home, casting long, familiar shadows across the porch. I'd driven the hour and a half from my apartment in the city, looking forward to a quiet weekend of sorting through some old files in my room, maybe catching up on a few design projects in the peace of the suburbs. My mother, Eleanor, was visiting her sister, so I knew the house would be empty. I pulled my worn leather handbag from my shoulder, fished out my house key, the one I'd had since I was 16, the one with the chipped blue paint on the head, and slid it into the front door lock. It didn't turn. I tried again, jiggling it, pushing harder. Nothing. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. This wasn't just a sticky lock. The key wouldn't even fully seat itself. I pulled it out and looked closely. The lock cylinder was different. Brand new, gleaming brass. My breath hitched. I walked to the back door, the one leading into the kitchen, a habit from countless childhood evenings. I tried that key. Same result. New lock. My mother had changed all the locks, effectively locking me out of the house I'd grown up in, the house where I still kept half my life stored, the house I considered a second home. The message was clear, chilling, and utterly humiliating. I didn't call her. I just stood there, the familiar scent of honeysuckle from the neighbor's yard suddenly feeling alien. What I didn't understand yet was that this wasn't just about controlling access to the house, it was about controlling access to my entire future, and my mother had no idea I held a different kind of key, one that would unlock far more than just a door. To understand why this felt like such a profound betrayal, you need to know Eleanor. My mother has always been a woman who likes to be in charge. Not in a loud, demanding way, but subtly, meticulously. She managed our household budget down to the penny, orchestrated every family holiday, and had a way of advising me on my life choices that always felt more like a directive. When I left for college, I thought I was escaping that orbit. I got my own apartment, built my own career, but the gravitational pull of her influence never quite vanished. She still had a key to my apartment for emergencies, and I still had one to the house, a silent agreement that I was always welcome, always family. It was a comfort, a tether, even if it sometimes chafed. The house itself was a character in our lives. A 3-bedroom ranch, nothing grand, but filled with memories. My grandmother, Clara, lived with us for many years after my grandfather passed. Clara was the quiet counterpoint to Eleanor's intensity. She had a way of seeing things, of understanding people, that my mother lacked. Clara, a retired librarian, taught me to love books and to question assumptions. She also taught me the value of true independence. After Clara passed away 6 months ago, the house felt emptier, and my mother's controlling tendencies seemed to intensify, as if she was trying to fill the void. Clara had left me a modest inheritance, $30,000. It wasn't life-changing money for some, but for me, a freelance designer trying to save for a down payment on a small studio apartment, it was everything. Clara had been very specific in her will. The money was for my future, for my independence. She'd even written a small note, tucked into the will, about planting your own roots, Sarah Bug. Eleanor, however, saw it differently. She was furious that Clara hadn't left her a larger share, or at least given her control over my portion. "It's far too much for you to manage alone, dear," she'd said, sipping her tea, her gaze sharp. "You'll just fritter it away on art supplies and avocado toast." That was the beginning of the escalation. Eleanor started advising me on how to spend the money almost immediately. Her latest boyfriend, Richard, a man with a perpetually slicked-back comb-over and an air of vague prosperity, had an investment opportunity in a new online marketing venture. "He's a very successful businessman," Sarah, Mom insisted over the phone, her voice laced with an expectation I knew well. "He could really help you make that money grow. Think of it as a loan to him, with a generous return." I politely, but firmly, declined. I explained that Clara's wishes were clear, and I intended to use the money for a down payment. Eleanor's jaw tightened. Your grandmother was a dreamer, Sarah. Practicality is what matters. A few weeks later, I went to the house to pick up some design books from my old room. I noticed my favorite art history book, a heavy tome with a worn blue cover, was missing from my shelf. It wasn't a valuable book, but it was sentimental. I also couldn't find the small silver locket Clara had given me on my 18th birthday, a tiny hummingbird etched into its surface. I asked Eleanor about them. She waved a dismissive hand. Oh, Sarah, you're always misplacing things. I probably tidied up and put them somewhere. Or maybe you took them to your apartment and forgot. Her tone suggested I was being childish, making a fuss over nothing. I let it go, but the feeling of unease lingered. My mother had always had a habit of borrowing things from my room without asking, but this felt different. More deliberate. Then came the phone call from the bank. It was Maria, a customer service representative, calling about an unusual transaction on an old joint savings account. This account had been set up when I was a teenager, a way for my mother to deposit birthday money or small allowances. It was supposed to be dormant, with only a few dollars left in it. Maria explained there had been a withdrawal of $5,000, transferred to an unfamiliar account. It's a joint account, Ms. Jenkins, Maria said, so either party can authorize transactions. But given the inactivity, we just wanted to verify. My blood ran cold. Eleanor. She had accessed the account. $5,000. It wasn't the full inheritance, but it was a significant chunk of money, and it was my money, even if it was in a joint account. I told Maria I hadn't authorized it and asked her to flag any further activity. That detail mattered later. That call, combined with the missing items and my mother's push for me to invest with Richard, made the pieces click into place. Eleanor wasn't just being controlling, she was actively trying to take my inheritance, to remove my independent access to my own life and resources. The changed locks weren't just about keeping me out of the house, they were the physical manifestation of her desire to keep me out of her financial schemes, to keep me from discovering what she was doing. She was trying to sever my ties, to make me dependent, or at least compliant. The humiliation of being locked out was suddenly secondary to the cold dread of realizing the depth of her betrayal. I didn't call her. Not then. I drove back to my apartment, the silence in the car heavy with a new kind of understanding. I had a second key, a spare for the back door from years ago, before she'd upgraded the front door lock. It was an old, brass skeleton key, slightly tarnished, that I'd kept in a small, carved wooden box with other sentimental items from my grandmother, things Clara had given me that Eleanor always overlooked. I'd never returned it, partly out of sentiment, partly out of a vague, unarticulated feeling that I might need it someday. That day had arrived. Before I acted, I needed to prepare. I called the bank again, this time speaking to a fraud specialist, explaining the situation with the joint account and the unauthorized transfer. They confirmed the $5,000 had gone to an account under Richard Sterling's name. They also told me that Eleanor had recently inquired about a loan, using some of my grandmother's estate assets as collateral. That detail hit me like a physical blow. She wasn't just taking my money, she was trying to leverage Clara's legacy against me. I also reviewed Clara's will again, paying close attention to the clauses about the inheritance and the executor, which was my Aunt Carol, Eleanor's sister. This was important. Carol was fair-minded, though easily intimidated by Eleanor. The next morning, when I knew Eleanor would be at her weekly bridge game, I drove back to the house. My heart pounded as I parked down the street, feeling like a criminal in my own home. I walked around to the back, pulled out the old brass key from my pocket and slid it into the back door lock. It turned with a satisfying click. The door swung inward, revealing the familiar scent of lemon polish in Eleanor's potpourri. I stepped inside, the silence of the empty house amplifying my every breath. I went straight to my old room. It was partially cleared out. My desk was gone, replaced by a generic console table. Some of my books were in boxes, stacked neatly in the corner, labeled donations. The missing art history book and the locket were nowhere to be seen. My stomach twisted. She wasn't just locking me out, she was erasing my presence. Next, I went to Eleanor's home office, a room she usually kept locked. The door was, surprisingly, ajar. On her meticulously organized mahogany desk, a manila folder lay open. Inside, I found bank statements for the joint account, showing not just the $5,000 transfer, but several smaller ones over the past few months, totaling nearly $10,000. There were also documents related to a loan application, indeed in my name, with Clara's modest investment portfolio listed as collateral. The signature on the application was a clumsy forgery of my own. My mother had been systematically draining the joint account and attempting to secure a loan against my inheritance, all without my knowledge or consent. He was planning to use my money, and Clara's legacy, to fund Richard's dubious venture. My hands trembled as I took out my phone and meticulously photographed every single document. The bank statements, the loan application, even the notes she'd scrawled in the margins about securing liquidity for Richard's venture. Then, I searched my old room again, more thoroughly. Tucked away in a box of old photo albums, I found my blue art history book. And hidden inside its pages, wrapped in a faded handkerchief, was Clara's hummingbird locket. I carefully placed them in my bag. Before I left, I found a small notepad and pen on Eleanor's desk. On her favorite lavender stationery, I wrote a single, calm sentence: I used the key you didn't know I had. I know everything. I folded the note and placed it precisely in the center of her pillow. The phone rang less than an hour after I arrived back at my apartment. It was Eleanor, her voice a shrill mix of fury and panic. "How dare you trespass in my house, Sarah? What do you think you're doing?" "I used the key you didn't know I had, Mom," I repeated, my voice steady, though my heart was still racing. "And I found the documents. The bank statements. The loan application. Richard Sterling's name. I know about the $5,000, and the $10,000 before that. I know you tried to forge my signature." There was a stunned silence on the other end. Then, she launched into a torrent of excuses. "It was for your own good, Sarah. That money was just sitting there. Richard has a brilliant mind, he just needed a little capital to get started, and then you'd have seen incredible returns. You're so naive about money, you would have just wasted it." "It was my money, Mom," I said, cutting her off. "And Clara's legacy. You had no right. I've already closed the joint account. I've reported the fraudulent loan application to the bank. They'll be investigating." Her voice turned desperate. "Sarah, please, don't do this. Think about what this will do to me. To the family. Richard will be ruined. I'll be ruined." "You ruined it, Mom," I replied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "When you decided to betray my trust and steal from me. When you changed the locks, thinking you could control my life. The relationship was irrevocably broken. Eleanor tried every tactic: manipulation, threats, tears, even involving other relatives who, thankfully, listened to my side of the story and the evidence I had. My Aunt Carol, the executor of Clara's will, was particularly appalled by the loan application attempt and ensured that Eleanor could not touch Clara's remaining assets. Richard Sterling vanished from the picture, his investment venture apparently collapsing without Eleanor's promised capital. Eleanor didn't face criminal charges, thanks to the bank's decision to handle it internally as a family dispute and my reluctance to press further, but her reputation among our extended family was severely damaged. She lost the trust of many, and more importantly, she lost any access to my finances or my life. With the inheritance finally secure, and after months of searching, I found a small studio apartment in a quiet part of the city. It wasn't grand, but it was mine, and the down payment felt like a victory. I moved my few remaining belongings from Eleanor's house, the ones she hadn't packed for donations, and started fresh. One evening, unpacking a box of keepsakes, I found the old brass skeleton key that had unlocked my mother's deception. It was tarnished, just as before, but it no longer felt like a symbol of access to a childhood home. Now, it felt like a symbol of freedom, a reminder that sometimes, the most important keys are the ones no one expects you to have. I placed it on the small shelf above my desk, next to Clara's hummingbird locket, a quiet testament to the roots I had finally planted for myself.